This mark carries the anger of an entire race, but it's going to hurt. What's up, everyone? This is The Furious Nevermind, where the Reaper's death mark, and I'm back for another episode of Books for Trolls. This will be the subtle art of not giving a fuck by a counterintuitive approach to a good life by Mark Manson. All right, so it's going to be a longer review, so if you don't have time, just here's a little quick synopsis. The subtle art of not giving a fuck does away with the positive psychology craze, which I'm into, by the way, to instead give you a stoic or cynic approach, which I'm also into, of living a life that might not always be happy, but is meaningful and centered only around what is important to you, or something like that. The fact of the matter is those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be cynical and use positive psychology at the same time. But that's basically the gist of it, okay? What's that you say? Hurry up? Okay, fine. The key to a good life is not giving a fuck about more. It's about giving a fuck about less. Giving a fuck about only what is true and immediate and important. So there you go. Now get out of here, you rascally rabbit. Anyone who wants to stick around for the next however long, just be ready, all right? So, who is Disappointment Panda, you ask? Well, Disappointment Panda is the hero that none of us want, but all of us need. He's the proverbial vegetables to our mental diet of junk food, and he's the mascot for this book. See him on the screen, on the thumbnail, wearing his sombrero, even though he's a panda. So, were I Disappointment Panda himself, I might say the following. Hey Mark Manson, author. Hey Mark, as in you are a Mark, sense of the word. I know that you charge $12 for the ebook and $15 for the 5-hour audiobook on Google Play Books or Audiobooks respectively. However, since I'm basically everyone's honest inner jerk, I found the pirated full text of the subtle art of not giving a fuck and hyperlinked it in the description box below. Furthermore, since I'm massively disappointing, it's not an audiobook, but if one were to activate the talkback function in the Android accessibility suite, also on iPhone, the text-to-speech engine will read the text aloud using either the Google voice or the Android voice, depending on your settings. So, effectively, I've given, with all due respect, Mr. Mark Manson the big fluffy finger. So if you want to read the book for free, just like I said, do the text-to-speech thing, and bam, there you go. So the desire for more positive experiences is itself a negative experience, something that I've been struggling with recently. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is in itself a positive experience. That was a quote from Mark Manson in his book. So they cover in this book the law of reversed effort, which pertains to what I just read, otherwise known as the backwards law. Namely, the harder we try, the less we succeed. What they call overdoing it, right? Burning out, different things like that. This is the backwards law, and it's talked about by two influential philosophers and writers, Aldous Huxley and Alan Watts. These two writers took notice of the phenomenon that occurred when conscious will is applied to achieve results. The author claims that, so basically that's what the backwards law is. When you try so hard to do one thing, you end up doing the other thing because they're not letting it settle, so it's too forced. Okay, so side note, the author claims we're in a democracy, but Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution dictates that we are in a republic. Okay, so he's wrong about that. He also claimed he used the quote, "We are apes, but genetic evidence reveals," he said we are apes, blah, blah, blah. But genetic evidence, as I covered in my video, 7 Conspiracies, Apes, Planet, we are only 2% genetically similar or genetically identical to apes. That 2% is the protein coding segments of our DNA, but it's of that 2% of the protein coding segments of our DNA, we are 98% similar. You see? So that's like saying, oh, out of the 2%, 98% is similar. Big whoopee. Okay, that's barely any. Even though it is the protein coding segments, but it's the manifestations of them that dictate whether you're going to be this animal or that animal, and so on and so forth. So, and there are, I think, like 20, I covered it more in detail in that video, so I guess I'll hyperlink it, go check it out. It's pretty short. He also claimed, he claimed we were apes. That was wrong. Democracy, that is wrong. I did like the author's Manson's, what he called the Manson's Law of Avoidance, was pretty cool. The more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid doing it, and that means that the more something threatens to change how you view yourself, how you believe yourself to be, the more you will procrastinate ever getting around to doing it. Case in point, I'm currently doing a project which I'll cover in 20 days, give or take, in retrospect, and that's basically what I'm dealing with, okay? So, but you'll figure that out once that comes out. I'll give you a hint. It's a warring bachelor versus peaceful wife episode. A few introspective questions were also posed by the authors. You may notice it when you're reading the pirated book, that a person ought to be aware of. Those questions are, how do I feel? Why do I feel that way? And what value assessments are informing my judgments on a given subject? This type of awareness is oftentimes so glossed over that most people aren't even aware of their own feelings or why they feel that way or what values are informing those decisions, okay? So it's good to go ahead and just look at those subjects and be aware of them so you don't, just go on autopilot. Good values, the author says, are reality-based, socially constructive, and immediate and controllable. Bad values are superstitious, socially destructive, and not immediate or controllable. Okay? So when we refer to value judgments, that's what we're talking about. So the subtleties contained in the subtle art of not giving a fuck are as follows. Subtlety 1, not giving a fuck does not mean being indifferent. I'm not a fan of apathy, by the way. It means being comfortable with being different. Okay? I like that. Subtlety 2, not giving a fuck about adversity. You must first give a fuck about something more important than adversity, okay? So essentially that means, you're gonna dwell on nonsense until you have something to focus on, okay? It's true. Subtlety 3, whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing what to give a fuck about. Pretty straightforward. The 5 values that Mr. Manson encourages you to have are as follows. Choosing to be responsible for whatever happens in your life, even if it's not your fault. You can choose how you respond to things, which is like, or rather, that is to say, those were the 5 values, those things I just read. I got that out of whack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so, so those are the values, the subtleties. But basically, the main thing here is radical responsibility, what I'm calling. I already use radical honesty, right? Where I'm always telling the truth, even if it's self-incriminating. But basically, radical responsibility, what I call it, goes like this. I may not be to blame for all of my problems, but I am responsible for them, okay? So I got hung up on that a lot, and it's basically true, okay? So I'm going to start taking responsibility even if I'm not at fault. Okay, so with great power, says the book, comes great responsibility. And it's true. But there's a better version that the book uses, which I thought was, an improvement. With great responsibility comes great power. The more we choose to accept responsibility in our lives, the more power we exercise over our lives. There you have it, folks. All right, so I'll catch you all in the next one. Later.